thanks. You're going to help me today. Good girl. So this video goes out to Rebecca, who wants some tips on how to achieve a prolonged downstay on a bed or a mat. So we're going to work through that. There's a little bit of a chat to go through on this one because there's quite a few concepts that I want to get across. So we'll get started. So the first thing is that when I'm teaching this, I wouldn't use the dog's actual bed to begin with. The reason for that is that their actual bed, they can come and go whenever they choose. So then it can make it a little bit unclear for the dog that this is a situation when you can't come and go. So I would use a separate bed for my training purposes. Later on, we can transfer it to their actual bed. The other thing is that I want the spot that I put the dog to be very, very clear. So I like to use raised up trampoline style beds because it's very, very obvious that either the dog's on the bed or they're off the bed. There's no in between. So that can really help as well. The next thing is that I want to use a different cue. I have an informal go to your bed, which kind of means go over there and just, don't bother me, versus what I call place, which means you have to go to this spot and you have to stay there until you're released. So that's the first thing is, you can call it mat or bed, but make sure it's different to your informal, please go to your bed and lie down kind of thing. So I have my place command, which means you have to stay there. So the stay is implied. I don't actually tell the dog to stay. I just teach them that place means you have to be there until you're released. So that's the other really important thing, is that we have to have a specific release for this behaviour. So the release word, some people say free or break or okay. You heard that one, didn't you? And again, the release is very different to the giving the dog a specific instruction. So a specific instruction is something like off. So off means get off there, I don't want you to be there. So we don't want to use that. And come, we don't want to call the dog from their place, because then when we move away from them, they think we're going to call them and they want to get off. So we don't call them to us, we don't tell them to get off, we just release them. Okay, free, break, whatever word we're going to use. So let's have a little look at how this first step is going to be, which is go to the place and then release. So are you going to come and help me, Jinx? Good girlie. So I think we can see the bed there. Okay, you ready? So place. Good girl. And she can kind of automatically lie down, but she doesn't really have to lie down. She just has to be on that place. Again, if she wanted to sort of fidget and turn around, that would be fine. So she doesn't have to lie down. All right, and then we'll just show you the release. So, okay. So she knows very clearly that she can get off, but she doesn't actually get a treat for that. Okay, good girlie. So now we're going to move on to the three components of our downstay, which are duration, distance and distraction. Okay, so the 3 Ds. So we're going to work first of all on duration, which means staying on the bed for longer periods of time. So let's have a little go at that. So I'm going to make myself comfortable. There's some food for Jinx. There's a cup of coffee for me, and we're going to go onto the place. Good girl. So now I can just sit here. This is building up duration. So this is how long I want her to stay on the bed for. So by building up the duration, I'm just going to continue to feed her. But nothing else is going to happen. This is just staying there for longer and longer periods of time. So I can have a little bit of my coffee, and I'm just going to keep rewarding for the downstay on the bed with duration. Good. I'm also going to introduce my word. That means you're doing a good job, keep going. So I say good. I could say good girl. But it's important that that word means you're doing the right thing, keep going. I see a lot of people using good dog to mean that the dog's finished. So then you say good dog and they jump off the bed because they think, oh, I'm finished now. So good or good girl, good dog. That means you're doing the right thing. I want you to keep going. Good. Right, so now I'm going to release her to show her that she can now, the exercise is finished and that she's free to get off the bed. Okay, good girlie, well done, good girl. All right, so that's our duration. So now we're going to work on the next of the 3 Ds, which is distance. So for this one, I'm just going to move the camera. Good, so now we're working on distance. So I'm starting to, move away and always going to go back to feed the dog. So again, I'm going to mark it, good, she's doing a good job. And move away and back. It's really important that we, again, never call the dog to us from the downstay. Remember, the stay is implied. Good. I'm not going to keep repeating stay. This is just, if I told you to go to your place, you have to stay there until I tell you that you've been released. Good. So my distance, I can kind of wander away. Good. I can go out of sight. Good. Good. So that's my distance. I'm moving away from the dog and always coming back. And when I want to release the dog, I will go back to the dog to release them. So I go back to her and I tell her, okay is her release. So now we're going to move on to the third of the Ds, which is distraction. It's important to remember that we must do all of these individually. We don't do distance and duration and distraction all at the same time. So when I'm starting with distractions, I would be very close to the dog. Now, Jinx actually went there of her own free will, so I'm just going to set her up again. Good girl, this one. Good girlie. So we're going to do our place. Good girl. So for my distractions, good. It can be anything, but I want to start with something that's not too difficult. So maybe I will just walk around with the food. That's a little bit distracting. Good. Keep going to feed her. I might start running around a little bit. This is a little bit more distracting. Good girl. I might move some furniture around. Good. You could get somebody else to be a distraction, somebody else to walk past. Sit down. Good. So this is part of our distraction component. So a great way to do this is I might be preparing my evening meal. So I'm chopping up my bits of food. Good. I keep going back to reward my dog on their place. So this is distracting for them. There's stuff happening over here, but they just have to stay on their spot. Good. Now, little tip. Some dogs find it easier if the food that we're using to reward them is close to them. So if I had a bookshelf up here, I can leave my food up here. Good. And we'll just put it down here for Jinx because she'll leave that alone. So I can then go back. Good girl. Good. Reward. Good girl. And the food is close to the dog, so they tend to kind of hang around where the food is. So if the food's up here somewhere, they're going to want to be there because they know that that's where the food's going to come from. So little tip for you. So now we're going to release Jinx, and I'll talk about some other techniques that we can use. Good girl. Okay. There you go. Now, I know that some people find that their dog goes completely nuts when there's food around. And this seems to be in conflict with what we want, which is a nice relaxed dog. But we can get over that. I do have some examples of how I've done this with dogs that have come to me for drop-off training. So basically what we do is we only reward the dog when they're calm and when they're not looking at the food or trying to get the food. So we basically use a shaping process, which is you only get the food when you're pretending the food's not there. And eventually what happens is the dog actually becomes calm even when in the presence of the food. So that's seems like a hurdle, but it's very easy to get over that. And we do end up with a nice calm dog on the bed. Now the next question is, how do I deal with it if my dog gets off the bed before they've been released? So I'll give you two little options. So one is to lure the dog back with food, but don't give them the food. So let's say Jinx has just got off the bed. I'm going to very quickly show her the food, take her back, and then I take the food away. Okay? So she's missed out on this food. By getting off the bed, she misses out on something, and this is very clear to her. So I take it away, she doesn't get it. Good girl. So now another strategy that we can use is, okay, that I can actually just keep a lead on my dog, and if they happen to get off, I simply pick up the lead, guide them back to where I want them, and do that. So if I'm going to use that technique, I have to follow through every single time. So every single time your dog gets off, you must replace them. I'm not cross with them. I don't have to shout at them. I just make sure that they go back to exactly where they were. And we really want to do it immediately. We don't want the dog to get off and wander about, and then 5 minutes later we go, oh, you're supposed to be on your bed, go back. Because then they've had 5 minutes of freedom. So it has to be immediately they get off, we return them. Either use the lead or lure them back with the food and take the food away. Now, I'm just going to show you one more little technique that can help with this. So my final little tip during our training process is to use a tether. So a tether basically means the dog is tied up. Okay, so I have my tether, which is attached to the dog's collar. And that means that if I turn my back and they wander off, they're not going to go very far. So that can really help us in the early stages of our training. Now, we're not going to use food forever. What we're trying to do is make the dog love doing their downstays on their bed because we have used so much food during that process. So what happens is this takes on a life of its own, and they just love to do it because it's been so strongly associated with the pleasant feeling of lying down and relaxing and having some food. So certainly at the end of the process, we're not feeding the dog. Occasionally we'll go back and reward them for a job well done, but it might just be some affection, and then the freedom to go out and do something that they want to do. So I hope this helps. Good luck with it, and happy training.